Is that going through?
My
There it
apologies,
is.
yes.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Calling the roll, Mr. Schrein,
Still here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Greenspan is absent. Mr. Brady. Ms. Simon. There is a quorum. Also
Okay.
like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Has there been any public comment in regards to any of the items on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Okay. There's been minutes of the last meeting of October 20th in our packet. Has everybody had a chance to look at those? Has it been moved? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion in regards to the minutes? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approval of the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes have here been approved. The chairman's prerogative is going to take and move the agenda items around into a different sequence than what appears before the public on the sequence. The first item will be the resolution 0273, if it could be read in the record.
Resolution number 2014-0273, a resolution making awards to various municipalities in the total amount of $1,469,440 for various municipal grant projects for the 2015 Community Development Block Grant Municipal Grant Program for the period 1/1/2015 through 12/31/2015, authorizing the county executive to execute the agreements and all other documents consistent with said awards in this resolution, and declaring the necessity this resolution become immediately effective.
Is there someone here to speak on behalf of this?
Good afternoon, Sarah Parks Jackson from the Department of Development to speak on behalf of the Municipal Grant Program. The County 2015 CDBG competitive grant process began July 15th with applications due to the department on September 16th. We had $1.5 million available. Part of that $1.5 million contained $300,000, which was returned to us from municipalities from last year. The maximum grant amount is $150,000. The grant applications were required to meet the national objective of benefiting low, moderate income persons or aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight. 23 out of our 51 urban county communities submitted applications totaling $3.2 million. Of the 23, 2 applications were determined ineligible. Our review committee read and reviewed all 23 applications, had discussion about the applications, came to a consensus score, and the recommendation that you have before you is the conclusion that the committee came based on scores and availability of funds.
Other questions from members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Sarah, can you share with us the 13 that did not win?
Bedford Heights, Brooklyn, Brook Park, Fairview Park, Glen Willow, Highland Hills, North Olmsted, North Rando, Oakwood, Olmsted Township, University Heights, Walton Hills, and Woodmere.
I noticed on the Maple Heights, it's not an exact 150,000. Can you kind of?
That was their request.
At their request.
They, all applications that were recommended for award were fully funded based on their request, and that was what Maple Heights requested.
You couldn't $560? I can't believe their accuracy is that finite.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just very quickly, just so I better understand this, you said that 300,000 was returned Could you explain?
We had two communities who were awarded funding last year. And due to some issues that both communities had, they were unable to actually use the funding, so they had to return that money to us.
So I better understand the process. It doesn't matter to me which communities they were in terms of what I'm asking. What were the reasons they had issues? What kind of issues?
Both communities had changes in leadership in between getting the CDBG award and actually being able to implement the project, and that caused, for example, one.
So there was a electoral transition?
Yes. And for one community, well, for both communities, it caused some issues in their ability to use the money. One was a location change from what was originally applied for. The other was just political
No, actually,
issues.
it's kind of easy, I think, for the council to relate to that at this particular point in the year. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Those $300,000, do they come back into our funds to be used for other cities or shovel-ready projects?
It's included when a project doesn't complete during that project year, we roll it over to the next year. So the 1.5 million that we are recommending for this program year includes that 300,000 from the last.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit about what the selection criteria are?
Yes, sir. Our selection criteria has 3 components to it. We look for the project impact, and that is how that particular project will impact the community or the neighborhood as a whole. We look for timeline, and that timeline is because this is federal funds, and we are on a timeline ourselves. We have what is called a times test that we have to meet. So we look to make sure that the communities can spend the money within the allotted time so that we can report that information to HUD. And the next is just the feasibility of their ability to get the project done as they've described it.
And one follow-up question. Is any, like, let's just suppose that next year, the same 23 communities applied. Is any consideration given to who got money last year, or is that not a consideration?
That is not a consideration. Our review committee, in looking at the applications, looks to see whether or not the applicant has identified whether or not they can complete the process, and the scoring dictates who is awarded funding. Yes.
Larry Benders, Director of Development. Councilman, if I could amplify Sarah's response. Every year we've gone back to the communities and we've said, this is your program. What rules work, what rules do not work. And one of the things we asked them specifically was, should we have a scoring factor, criteria for how many times this community has applied and been successful in the past? So in other words, if you got money last year, should you be excluded this year? And the communities unanimously said, well, uniformly said, no, we don't want that to be a consideration if someone got an award in the prior year, that they should not be ineligible in the next year. If that was the nature of your question, we put that question among many others to them, and that was their response. So they did not want to be penalized if they won in a prior year. They wanted to be eligible in another year.
One further question, if I may. Has there been any pattern of any communities applying pretty consistently and not getting approved? And if so, is there anything that we do to help them understand what the problems are and how they can improve their applications in the future?
I do not believe there is a consistent pattern, but in response to your second point, all the communities are made aware that they can contact our office. I am not on the review committee. I sit and facilitate the review, but we will go over as staff the application and look at areas that that we determine as staff that they could improve upon in general, such as read the application in its totality, answer the questions, basically answer the question, because sometimes they don't quite answer the question. Be as detailed as possible. What we get sometimes is applicants who have gone out and gotten the information on the, for example, the road work and how much it will cost versus someone who just said, we want to have the road done, and they had their building commissioner or somebody cost it out, as opposed to having an engineer cost it out or asking our Public Works Department to cost it out. And also to be consistent throughout the application, including the information that's included as an attachment. And by that, in the narrative, there's applications, sometimes they'll say that the cost, say, is $100,000, but then the attachment says it's $75,000. So as staff, we work through with them, be consistent, make sure you answer the question fully, and be as detailed as possible. And we offer that to winners and losers.
Sarah, how many first-time winners?
This year, I know Seven Hills is a first time. I think Seven Hills is. South Euclid might be a first time or hasn't gotten in a while.
If I may, Sarah, excuse me, thank you. Larry Benders, Director of Development. Councilman, this round, for the first time, 2 or 3 communities that had not applied before, or had not won before, won. So it's an indication that the process has become easier to understand and more accessible for other communities that we haven't seen in the past. I would say that there's not been a pattern of consistent losers, but to Sarah's point, what we've seen is if a community doesn't do a good job of having a solid, internally consistent application, it hurts their ability to score well, because it's a competitive process. So once the application is submitted, there is no conversation. We don't communicate with the applicants and talk about their application. It's done. So the application has to stand on its own. And this year, some of the losers had problems that couldn't be resolved by the committee, so they did not score nearly as well as the product itself might have warranted, but the application was not strong enough.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the legislation that was just recently passed, the ordinance which expanded the applicants' award to different projects. So will that be communicated to those municipalities? And if so, when would that be coming in, September of 15?
We will have a meeting early next year with all the communities, open a public meeting to talk about the program, get their feedback from last year, and then talk about the changes that the legislation has introduced, and make clear to them that now they are able to apply for any CDBG eligible activity. It does not mean that they may score well, because it's a closed process. And then if we get 25 applications, we'll score the team will score the 25 applications, and the best ones will win, subject to funding availability. But we'll communicate that as soon as we get all of them together with next year's program.
Okay, Chair, I'll ask some questions. These are all 100% federal funds coming to us in regards to this. How many years have we actually been doing this at this point in time, that we've been using this criteria?
This criteria this is our third year, or our third round, I should say.
Okay.
We made significant changes from how scoring was done previous.
Okay, because I wanted to follow the same path of Mr. Miller out there. Can you present us with a spreadsheet then that shows the last 3 rounds, who won, who didn't, and then same spreadsheet on second page of those who were not accepted? just so we can see that, because we all have responsibility back to our various communities. And I think it would be just nice to be able to identify the 3 rounds. I know we say there's not a consistent winner, but it would be nice to be able to establish that, not consistent losers out there. The commission itself, who is on the commission?
Our review committee consists of 2 development staff persons, our deputy director and our business manager, a representative from the planning commission, a representative from Public Works, and a representative from one of our entitlement communities, which this year was Cleveland Heights, was a representative to the committee.
Okay, how was that put together? I mean, who selected the individuals that sat there?
We did this 3 rounds ago and decided that because we see a lot of infrastructure projects that come in as applications, that we needed a Public Works representative there because they understand that work. A planning commission, a person, because of what they do in working with these communities in preparing plans and doing other activities, are 2 development staff people, or deputy director, just because we wanted somebody internal. And we have rotated even our internal staff between the rounds before this was the ED administrator, and now our business affairs administrator set in this year. And the entitlement community is because those folks get the same federal funds, and they are doing activities in their communities similar to what we do. And we wanted that outside perspective on the committee.
They created their own rules, or I'm not sure I understood exactly. I heard from Mr. Benders that the participants help create the rules as to what they want to see, or when they said whether you could be a multi-year winner or not, was the
No.
group itself?
We
or-
had a meeting several years ago with all 51 urban county communities as we were looking to restructure the program, and we got feedback from them. That feedback included things like, no, we don't want you to segregate out because I won last year, I can't win next year. And other items that were of concern to them, they expressed to us what they wanted and what they didn't want.
Okay, and those rules are written down so that all the applicants see clearly how they're going to get scored, what the criteria is, what the point value is, or whatever we're using that these individuals you just identified are using?
That is correct, and that's on the application itself. And there's a FAQ that Sarah circulates and puts out to the community through the application process. So if anyone asks a question, any community has a question, the question is then put back to the community with our response. So no one community has one advantage because they had a conversation, a question asked and answered. So everyone has access to all of the kind of the community dialogue up until the day the applications are due.
And I understand that you don't have an active way in which the participant gets feedback in the middle of the process, but now that the process is closed, do we have an after-action process where we go by and tell those 13 communities, hey, this is why you lost, and here's what the difference between why the winning community got their award and what was short on your application?
Mr. Chairman, that is possible to do. We have been asked by communities questions along the way, and we are waiting till this body decides who are the winners and who are the losers, and then we can have the conversation with communities. But council people have asked us questions in writing about one application or another, and we can respond to those, but we don't want to talk to the community until the council's decided who the winners and the losers are. Then we can have that conversation, and we have a series of community meetings along the way to talk about what we learned, what we're doing going forward. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for them to ask us those questions once the decisions are made.
Okay, well, now with 3 years behind us, we should be able to go back and establish, here's what was decided on in year 1, 2, and 3, and here's what, and give some good feedback to these communities, because the winners want to know why did they win, and the losers want to know what was missing from their application.
True, Mr. Chairman, but the rules, the scoring criteria can change. 3 years ago, we were at death's door with HUD in terms of spending money in a timely fashion. That was the times test Sarah referred to. So our very strong emphasis was on feasibility and ability to get the project done in the 9 months remaining. That we've now demonstrated as a county and the applicant communities some better ability to get the projects done. Not perfect, as you heard, that two communities had to return money to us, which is an issue for us because we need to make sure all the money is expended. So we will look at the criteria when we meet with the communities again, I can imagine in the early next year, and we'll talk about what the scoring criteria is, what are the things, the levers we need to push really hard, what things are really important to get the projects done, what are less important, and then develop a new rubric, if you will, for the scoring next year. So we had 3 classes of scoring?
Yes.
So we'll see if we have 3 again next year, or if it's 4, how the weights fall once we see what's the situation, what kind of money do we have available, and what does our community need?
Okay. Can you present those back to the council, the individual 11 of us, so we can have those? Because our communities are asking, it's always after the fact, they'll ask why did somebody win or lose of an applicant? So you can present us with those, if you can send them out to the 11 of us, or send it to myself and I'll forward it. Yes.
Just one final question, something Mr. Bender said, I wasn't sure I heard it right. You seem to say, or at least I seem to hear, that something about the council deciding who the winners were, and I'm not aware of the council deciding who the winners are.
I think
but
by
You mean
your-
by passing the legislation,
Yes.
finally?
Yes, sir.
The legislation's in front of us, we make that final decision. We
That's-
didn't decide who won or lost, this legislation is just in front of us in order to appropriate the funding.
That's correct, but we just want to make sure we're not telling communities that any decision that that's the council's right to make. That's all.
Okay,
We're
I
making
just want to make
recommendation.
sure that
Yes.
my community, which did not receive funding, which I'm not debating, is not being told that I'm making that decision.
No.
Good enough.
No, sir, the decision the council makes is on the recommendation that we're making to the council, and then the council will decide.
Yeah, otherwise, you're going to see us asking for all 23 applications, which we don't really want, nor do we want to get involved with that.
Noted, agree. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. The 2 communities that were unable to successfully complete the projects last year were who? Which communities?
That was Olmsted,
And Bedford.
Olmsted Falls and Bedford, and yeah, those are the 2 communities to answer the question.
And Olmsted Falls, you say?
Yes, sir.
Or, okay, or Olmsted Township.
No, Olmsted Falls.
Okay, all right. So, and they did receive funding again this year.
They resubmitted.
Yes, and in that case, what they had submitted last year was a senior center in one location, and that was a winning application. After the project was approved, after the council accepted the recommendation, and the project was funded, they came back and said they'd like to put their senior center in a different location than what the application said. And we went back and forth and worked with them on that, and we said, you can't, you've changed the application. So they came back and they applied with that project, the senior center in the new location this year, and we're funded. But they had to return their money last year.
Okay, and last year's money was how much? This year's money was obviously 1.2 million that came forward from HUD. What was last year's?
It was 1.050.
1.050, okay. All right. Yeah, I would greatly encourage you to actually reach out to all 23 applicants, matter of fact, to all applicants that would be eligible. You say 51 potential communities could be eligible, and let them know, hey, I mean, what is the harm of waiting? Why wait till next year? Come back afterwards and say, hey, here's, after the award is done, after you get, past the breathing time, to go back and say, here's what happened, here they are, take the names off. The names are irrelevant. It's just, what did they do? What did their application look like? And who won and who lost based on that. And they can be just community A, B, C, and D. I don't think you need to even have the actual community, but it gives them the learning opportunity out there. And that way they can't, especially if you take all the names off. From that standpoint, and I'm not even sure that it's relevant to, other than more curiosity as to who won the last 3 years, as long as we're getting a good mix of communities out there and their applications are running on a consistent basis. Any other questions from anybody else? Okay, is there a motion to move this to, is there any exigencies to this?
Yes, we would like to get it moved forward so that we can get the contracts to the communities with a January 1 start date.
Okay, because we will not have the opportunity to let's see, well, in theory, we could still have 2 meetings. But that unfortunately puts that last meeting, which is, I think, an expedited meeting.
I think we really only consider it to be one meeting.
Whatever the
Excuse me,
December.
Mr. Chair, the next council meeting is December 9th. That's the last regular council meeting.
Yeah, I thought we dropped one in though, of a special meeting or something like that.
That's for the budget.
It's a specific subject.
Yes, it's only for the budget items.
Okay, all right. I mean, anything could be passed, but as long as, from the standpoint, then the chair will move to have this approved for a second reading, and exception to the rules. Is there a second on it?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of this coming before us for our second reading approval, suspension of the rules, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll be presenting that at the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The way the agenda, again, is set up, there is a discussion in regards to casino revenue in more of a conceptual aspect of what's going on. And Mr. Benders, that was before we get into the 3 applications, or I'm not sure whether Mr. Kelly, whoever, was going to talk on this in a general session, a little bit like what we just had there. If you can pick up on item 6, which is the discussion on that, and we'll go forward, and then we'll come back to the 3 individual applications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nathan Kelly, Director, Deputy Chief of Staff for Development.
It's only 4 years, you know.
So, Mr. Chair, do you want me to begin in kind of without structure, or?
Yes, in regards to, the item was discussion of casino revenue funds, and going through some of the criteria.
Sure.
I did send you an email out this morning with the hopes that perhaps you can touch on some of those points as were discussed.
Sure.
In there.
Well,
And for the benefit of my fellow committee members, I asked in there some of the same kind of questions that we just got done asking about criteria, selection, who was rejected, who was accepted, some of those exact same questions that we just went through here on our last resolution. I just asked those same things. Give me the background of what's going on in casino revenue, because I know that this was a hot topic 2 years ago when we first passed the Casino Revenue Fund.
Surely. Well, good afternoon, committee members. First, I want to begin by giving a brief overview of casino revenue and its status. If you'll recall, when council voted to create the Casino Revenue Fund and the subsequent Downtown Development Fund and the programs, that there was an anticipation of revenue that would come from gross casino revenue taxes that would come to the county that was substantially greater than that which has been received. Shooting from the hip, it's been about 7.5 or 8 million a year in revenue to the county. The flow is that the funds are accrued by the state and then advanced to the county by a formula quarterly. We created a program to emphasize downtown development for a period of 4 years, ending in July of 2016. The notion being strategic about how we make flexible and significant economic development incentives is more effective than taking a broader, less strategic, countywide approach. And so we wanted to prove a model that emphasizing a particular geographic area would deliver greater results than spreading it countywide. And I would say that without equivocation, and with the assistance of other trends and other partners, downtown today is significantly different than it was when this program was proposed. And the county and the city and other partners have worked together to make downtown what it is today and its trajectory. The projects that you're going to see proposed today seek to continue that velocity of development and placemaking for the downtown district. They are ambitious, very ambitious projects. These, I would say, are more ambitious than the ones that we brought to you the first time. And I'll let those folks speak on behalf of the projects after we have this discussion. But we also had a spirited conversation a year ago or so, a little bit more than a year ago, about spending the funds in contrast to our typical budgeting model where we anticipate revenues and then we budget expenses accordingly. We've taken a different approach with the casino revenue funds where we make sure that we are only authorizing those expenses which, for which we already have revenues in place. So the proposals today are those which we already have.
Before, we'll stay on, let's stay on this, the concept before we get into the proposals.
Sure.
Out there, because I'm sure that some of my colleagues will have some questions similar to what you just experienced a few seconds ago, as to criteria and things of that nature. But I guess I will start by reviewing the legislation a little differently in that the first 2 years, that's why we called it a fund, were supposed to be funds that we're accumulating for those first 2 years and not to be spent in these first 2 years unless they were found to be exigencies to accelerate those spending of those funds. It was the vision that we were going to have big enough dollars reserved in those funds that we could use them in that 2-year period following the fund creation, that it would be sitting out there. Last year, it was decided and recommended that we would spend down that first year accumulation because of the exigencies of those three projects that came forward. So we didn't build those into rolling them in after the second year. The same thing sounds like it's getting ready to be recommended here for these three projects. So we're going to go into year 3 and 4 without a quote fund that's there. The funds will have, it's being recommended based on my reading of this, that they will be drawn down with the intent that also by the time we get out to the end of the 4th year, that we could be using these for any of the 59 communities within the county. They too, I believe, was written in, I think Mr. Brady had suggested that same language of exigencies should we find that something was so important that it could be pulled forward also into those 59 communities was the way that I think we ended up with compromise even on to the 59 communities. So I just want to say that the intent was to create a fund. The fund did not get created as much as it's temporarily a fund because it got drained. Almost, matter of fact, it got drained every single dollar. We had to come back and actually true up the dollars that went into Playhouse Square to get to their $4 million. And it sounds to me as though we're not going to be carrying this as quote funds that would have built up into and what we'd hoped to maybe being 10, 15, $20 million. It's obviously not going to be there for a significant project, i.e. a bridge or something of that nature. So that was my recollection of the way we actually passed it. It was not that every year we would be taking out whatever dollars came into this quote fund for the current projects that were in vogue. It was also my recollection that we were also supposed to see some kind of criteria similar to what we just talked about as to the selection process, as to why we're seeing one project versus another project, very similar to what we just heard about as to scoring and things of that nature. So I'll leave that to any other comments from anybody else up here, but I was under the impression we were going to be also seeing criteria just as we see in the $100 million fund, just as we just heard about on the block grant funds, and would be my envision that we would see that same thing with the casino revenue dollars. Any other comments from my colleagues, confirming or any comments about the chair's comment? Hearing none, and I guess from standpoint, any response from the chair in regards to anything I just said?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not certain that well, I don't recall the characterization that the intent was to build a fund that, from which we would not spend for catalytic projects. However, I will say that the approach that we've used should please the chair for this reason. I can elaborate on some of the criteria that we went through for the projects that are going to be proposed to you today. But one of the significant elements is that the largest expense, well, any of the private expenses that have been already approved by council or are to be considered by council are in the form of loans. In this way, we will recapitalize the fund with interest for the benefit of the 59 communities that will have access to the Casino Revenue Fund beginning in the late summer of 2016. The longest term of loans is 7 years, so that we'll start to see that fund grow for the benefit of other communities outside downtown.
Are all three of these loans? I thought I was under the impression that one was.
Two loans that are for private spaces. The publicly accessible improvements, their streetscape, sidewalks, et cetera, are not intended to be loans.
It's forgivable, at least. It's a loan on paper, but it basically is going to be forgiven if all the criteria is met.
And if I may, one of the reasons why we take a forgivable loan approach for the public improvements, which is contrary to what you would see if Bonnie were proposing something for a public works project, is because we're trying to incentivize other entities to participate. So the approach that's a little bit different here than previous years is we're in early, or last year, we're in earlier, and we're creating some pretty high standards about what participation should be like from other entities. So in this case, we have a proposal where the forgiveness exists, but the amount is up to and has to be matched by the city of Cleveland, for example, and that other certain criteria have to be met in order for it to be a forgiven loan.
Yeah, and I'm not adverse to it. I didn't want it characterized as a loan that's going to replenish into the fund. That particular one will not be replenished.
Well, but I wanted to take the opportunity to reveal that we learned from the first round and have improved our recommendations for council to reflect some of the feedback that we received in the first round of casino.
We heard earlier that there were 23 applications, of which 10 were successful. How many proposals came before whatever, and as you know where the next question is going to go, how many proposals came before whoever the reviewing body was?
Sure. Well, the answer is I don't know how many have been discussed. The background to that is that with the Muni Grant Program, we know that we have a fixed amount of money, and we know that we know the universe of eligible applicants is the urban county applicants. So we're able to reach out to them and create a head-to-head competitive matrix for them to apply and meet those criteria. In the instance of the Casino Revenue Program, all we have are the legislated criteria, the programmatic criteria, and then to prioritize those projects which would be awarded for maximum impact. So starting with the and assuming that the next question is, okay, well, what are those criteria, Nate? I'd go on to say the first are the legislated criteria, which are limited in geographic scope, and that funds are available, and that it's before June or July of 2016. We elaborated on those criteria to make it so that for private improvements, it's a loan, again, to recapitalize the program for the benefit of the suburbs, that it's for hard costs, that there's an expansion of tax base, or in the instance of public projects, that it is an enhancement to the district. And then we prioritized those for those projects which could be completed by June of 2016. That particular criteria to prioritize predated the RNC announcement, but is convenient or prescient, depending on your perspective.
So what is the priority that you established? If we have three before us and there were ones that they were prioritized above, what caused these three to be above number 4.
Well, but wait, there's more, which is to be able to leverage investment or other time-sensitive monies. So, for example, you'll hear one project that is in pursuit of state tax credit dollars. Those are on rounds, they are competitive, and they also require for eligibility a certain amount of public commitment. So we knew that we needed to meet, that it was a project that met the other criteria. And that brought a priority because of the calendar of the awards. New market tax credits, for example, none were awarded in Northeast Ohio in the most recent announcement. And it was a surprise because we're used to being able to attracting those kinds of other external incentives. We wanted to make sure that in this historic credit award that the Cleveland area wasn't shut out. So leveraging other dollars and it being ambitious, while not a binary goal, is one of the things that is an attribute of all of these deals. There weren't any proposals that came to the county with whom I met that had met all the other criteria about location, leveraging dollars, scale, affordability, that could actually get done that we had to decline. There were some that we encouraged to apply in the future because of their time scale. There were some that were unwilling to provide the necessary collateral to secure a loan. So in that respect, they didn't meet the criteria that we needed to bring a deal to this body for review and approval.
I'm not envisioning that this committee is going to vote these three out today. So can you present, unless I hear from my colleagues otherwise, can you present us with all of that information so that we as a body can have that, how many were considered and what the applications were? We know that 23 were considered for another review process that we were, by our action, yes, we technically were the ones who decided which 10 got approved. But we are adopting whatever you're bringing to the table, so.
I'll be unable to prove a negative. I will not be able to prove that somebody did not apply.
No, I'm not asking you not, tell us who did apply. Tell us who did bring items. Tell us what your criteria was. Show us the documentation. It sounds to me as though you have a body that decided on the community development block grants. They used the criteria. They made the cut from 23 down to 10. We're talking about, on that, $1.5 million, and we used a much more detailed criteria than we're talking about distributing over $9 million. We certainly ought to be able to have that same tool available to us. We have it in the $100 million Economic Development Fund, or the Western Reserve Fund. We just had it in the Community Block Grant. We should not have a lower standard for how we apply these monies. The three companies or three organizations here are thrilled to be recommended, but there might be three more that are just as disappointed that they're not recommended. And so it's only fair to the public body to know what that is.
Sure, I would reiterate my statement that there's a great chasm between the two programs, and I would add that in this instance, we have, another requirement of the program is that it isn't eligible for other Western Reserve funds, et cetera. So job creation, for example, is not a requirement of the deals that we see here. If we go down the path of creating those criteria, that will make sense when there is a larger geography, because you'll be able to compare apples to apples. In this case, the geographic area is so finite, and the requirements of the program, while they may seem ambiguous, they are great hurdles to climb over, to be able to provide the kinds of collateral and ambition and catalytic nature of the projects that we're talking about and that we've already seen is a significant step, especially when it's limited by time and space the way that these are.
Every time you make a list, it just confirms to me that there is a list. So tell me what the list is, tell me what you're using, and we can at least see what the understandings are. I mean, it's not real complicated. You just, every time you go through this, all I'm asking you
Happy
for
to
is.
provide that. I feel like,
Yeah,
we're
Mr. Jones?
getting,
Yeah.
If I can add, let me ask a similar question the same way. There was a review board, obviously, for, as you mentioned, those, our last agenda. But for your loans, you have your CCIC loan committee board. Did we take these casino revenue dollars to that CCIC board?
the
loan committee?
legislation here requires that we review them, that we present them to council.
Give me a yes, no. That might help.
No,
No. So that is the process that we use for our traditional loans, to go through the CCIC review board.
Yeah.
And you did not go to that board. So, yeah, obviously, these are casino revenue dollars. Maybe you have a different process. But to the spirit of this question, you should have a process. I don't see any reason why they could not have gone to the CCIC board, loan committee board, and, if not, how was it underwritten in that respect? But why not go to the CCIC board, loan
Understood.
committee?
okay, I can provide those criteria as we've outlined for you today,
Okay.
post-haste.
Good. Well, we will,
But I'm not, I
ahead.
want to make sure that you're getting what you want. So my pushback is, I need clarity on what are those things, because you're not going to see the list of applicants that were accepted or denied because they don't exist. We don't have applicants that didn't apply. Do you understand what I'm saying?
so there's only 3 companies, 3 organizations have applied for these funds.
That met this criteria to apply for this round. So there are others that have discussed it with my colleagues and others, but we also knew that we had limited funds available. So, we couldn't keep the door open to anticipate that which we don't know.
Okay, as a public body, you have to be logging in every person, every organization that comes to you and creates an inquiry for these funds. I assume that there's got to be a log in there, otherwise we would be at risk of somebody saying, hey, I went and talked to you folks and you didn't consider me. So someplace there has to be an economic development log of organizations that have come to you.
Okay?
Is that a correct statement or not?
I don't think it's a correct statement, but we can,
You wouldn't have an appointment log and people came to you and know who it is and what their projects were and why they didn't meet whatever the criteria is? I mean, someplace, it boggles my mind that you would not have that out there as a public body.
Mr. Chairman, that's Mr. Kelly. Am I hearing you correctly that when the county was approached, if it was clear that the project that was being pitched did not meet the criteria that they were somehow indicated to informally that they didn't meet the criteria? That's what it sounds like.
Councilman, yes. I would add, we don't, when we meet with people that have projects that they want to do, we don't anticipate or expect that they tell us what tool they want to use. They talk about a project that they want to do, a company that they're trying to expand, a site that they'd like to construct, and we take a consultative model to say, well, here is a program that we think would be the one for which you should apply. So some of those ended up being steered towards projects that you've already, or programs for which you've already approved funding. Some have said, well, you're not eligible for anything. And because the criteria of the casino revenue are to be larger scale, big deal projects, there isn't a large universe of those folks that are suitable for only this program.
Okay, well, you asked, I gave you some guidance this morning. I will give you some further guidance. If anybody else would like to submit points that they would like to see, that whatever the criteria is that you're using, and ask those questions, because I can only think that my colleagues, knowing that this was a hot button issue only 2 years ago when the casino revenues started to flow into the county, that it's probably not any less of a hot item amongst the 11 of us, because there's not a single item that we bring out or when we're talking to our mayors or our council that doesn't come up almost in every single one of the conversations, what's happening with casino revenue. Because every dollar that gets spent here is not a dollar that's going to transition in 4 years into the 59 communities that will be eligible for it.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
Ms. Simon?
Sure. I thought it was next year, 2015, that the municipalities outside the zone downtown district would be able to apply if there was something significant. Am I not correct that it was 15?
We put that same acceleration
In
language into both.
15.
That's
So what
correct.
happens if there's a significant project coming out of one of the municipalities in 2015 and this money's spent on these projects? Are we just going to tell them it's gone? Or are you anticipating the loan payback is going to be expedited to get something in a fund?
Excellent question. We'll have to do a couple of things. One is we'll have to expand the criteria, which you'll see in print shortly, to include other areas. We'll also have to make sure that there are funds available. The thing that is consistent about the Casino Revenue Fund is we do see quarterly deposits. And so that will continue to capitalize. Furthermore, in addition to loan repayments, which won't be starting next year to any degree, but we also have those projects which, for one reason or another, didn't spend all the funds. Recall that these are on a reimbursement basis, so there'll be additional funds available, or for those projects which, for one reason or another, don't proceed. So as the fund continues to grow its capital, then funds would be available. At a current pace, if nothing changed, you would see approximately, and all funds anticipated to be spent were spent at 100%. At a flat trajectory, you'd see somewhere around $7.5 or $8 million that could be spent for projects at this time next year.
Ms. Brady?
Thank you. Just for clarity, because when the councilwoman said that, I thought that was right, and I thought when I can't understand why we were talking about July 2016. I thought I must have gotten it wrong. I didn't raise the question, but she remembered it as I had remembered it. So, which is it, and why? Where did 2016 come
First
to?
2 years are exclusive for downtown. After January, projects of catalytic nature, I'd forget the verbatim from the legislation, from elsewhere in the county are also eligible to apply. After 2016, the summer 2016, then it is countywide, period.
Yeah, and again, it's my understanding, I don't have the language in front of me, do we have the legislation there? Is that the first 2 years we're supposed to be building a fund, only if there was a downtown project that warranted using those funds, were we then going to draw it down. We didn't obviously get to even the first year. We got past the first year before all those funds were drawn down. They did not go into the bank account and build on up. And you're correct in that those drawdowns could only be exclusively used if there was an emergency or a significant project for downtown. The second 2 years was still going into a fund, and only if a significant project was still to be coming forward from the suburbs could that be pulled forward. But that was still to be used for downtown for the second 2 year period of time, only if a project of a significant nature. I believe that was your suggestion.
So there's an overlap there.
There was an overlap, that's correct. But there were funds that were supposed to be being built up for the first 2 years. They didn't get built up. They got consumed. Here we are the second round, and it's going to get consumed based on at least the proposals that are before us. We will get you criteria. We'll get you the requests, and you can get us the criteria that you use.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just say these funds are being consumed, but I'm still concerned by the fact that it hasn't gone through, or you have not yet said what the vetting process, how this loan was underwritten. It did not go to the loan committee. What is? Do I need to go through the 5 C's of credit with you?
see.
Tell me the
So-
capacity, the character. What have you done to vet this project?
What we did was, we met with these different folks, and then on a rolling basis, also met with the criteria, with the departmental staff that ordinarily reviews applications before they go to the CIC. So once they met those criteria, including underwriting criteria, et cetera, then we felt prepared to advance them to county council.
So it followed the same procedures, except it did not go to the next step that you're suggesting.
And we're following the legislation. If that is something you think it should go to the CIC, we're happy to do that.
My question really is, why do you think it should not have gone to the CIC?
I don't know that, I don't think that it should have. I haven't said that. Trying to follow the ordinance.
Yeah, the ordinance was silent on that. What we did is, as we came out, we said we were going to look forward to the Economic Development Department to give us rules and guidelines that we would be bringing forward. It was my anticipation we would have seen those before the next round came up, just a similar way in which with the $100 million fund, we passed it with rules and guidelines actually in the core of the document. But $100 million was a significantly larger fund than what we're talking about here. But I think that perhaps what we need to do is, it's pretty clear that we need to have this before we go into bringing the other 59 communities, or else we're gonna have a room full of people who are gonna be disgruntled because unlike the criteria that we utilize for the block grants, those were federal criteria. This will be internally drafted criteria that we're gonna use in the county for those casino revenue dollars. And we need to make sure that we're being fair to every one of the communities that's going to be applying.
Mr. Chairman, Larry Benders,
Yeah.
Director of Development. That is in fact our intent. We're taking the lessons learned from the Muni grant process you've talked about in the earlier agenda item, this process, and I've asked Sarah to meet with me and come up with the criteria going forward for the 59 communities, because the geography is much bigger. We anticipate a wider range of kind of projects coming before us, so we're gonna have to figure out how do you evaluate those projects. So that's what we are working on now. We have been for several weeks.
Right.
Because
As
it is June 15 when you can accelerate projects in the entire county, so we want to be ready for that.
They can, but the intent of the legislation was still that those next 2 years would still be used for downtown, but they could be if the project would warrant it. So the only way they can warrant it is to have criteria written down so that everybody can understand what would warrant accelerating a project. Does that summarize what I believe was the intent of where we went with that? So
Mr. Chair, my intent obviously was to have
yeah, I know.
the casino revenue open to the municipalities, sooner than later. So this was an opportunity for them to apply, and just as the downtown district had the same opportunity, a similar opportunity. So, and we've awarded downtown projects under those exigent circumstances of having great impact, and we didn't have this formal criteria to which you seek, and I would hope the same would go for the municipalities, that I understand we need some structure to this, but I don't want to jeopardize or somehow prejudice the municipalities now when they come to apply, that we need some formal process when we've already awarded money to the downtown district under a similar ordinance. That's only my point, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
it seems to me that I understand what I think is the challenge of distributing money countywide versus the narrow area that is available, is eligible in the downtown area. But I would just say, going forward, that I think that this council should have more involvement in what the criteria will be going forward, because I personally, as one councilman, would not like to see this brought back to us as this is what we have decided the criteria will be, and that and while this is complicated, it seems to me that we're going to have a higher standard in some ways for smaller communities and smaller projects than we are for multi-million-dollar projects downtown, and something just doesn't sound right about that.
Well, and I think that when you read the original legislation, it was that if there was an agency to a project out in the other communities, it could be brought forth in that second period, second try period, if it was seen to be something to accelerate. But if we remember, we still said that 100% of those funds could be expended downtown for that period of time, only if a project was of significant nature. And that was the compromise that, and I know that was not what Ms. Simon would like to have seen, but at least it got included that projects could be done. So perhaps we'll set down our February meeting. This will all be behind us around this subject matter. What happened with the $100 million fund is they drafted the suggestions, and we then worked with making some changes out of this committee, and actually we finalized a document I think that's pretty effective right this moment out there as far as I was working. Yeah,
May I make a recommendation to the council?
sure.
Let's duplicate that approach. For in anticipation of the next phase of the legislation, we'll take it upon ourselves to work with some suburbs and some other experts and present something either in a workshop model with the committee, consistent with the economic development plan, or separate, or to the council as it deems fit, and then gather your feedback at that point so that you have something actionable to discuss instead of starting from scratch.
Let's pick is February a doable date? Okay, we'll make sure we schedule, that's assuming I'm still chair of this committee, and you are still presenting on the other side of the table for economic development. Irrespective of that, whoever's sitting here is the chair, and whoever's sitting out there, we'll build that in as a responsibility to make sure that by February, that will be presented to whoever the economic development committee is.
And I'll make the recommendations anyway,
Yeah,
regardless of whether or not I'm supposed to be.
yeah, okay, all right, we'll go from there.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As I mentioned, we should still go through the loan committee.
Well, I think that's
What you're saying?
you can incorporate that as, when we get to that point, we'll see what the recommendations are, and we'll see what the criteria is as it comes back. I mean, rather than prejudging how they're gonna write it up.
And I'm really speaking to these two specific projects. It would seem, because as everyone is saying, if we start getting into those smaller projects, they're certainly gonna be vetted. They're gonna be held to a standard that we could really have a discussion right now about these projects. I wouldn't mind asking a few more questions. I just took a moment and looked at some of the overall cost,
Well, why don't we wait till we get to the individual projects, we can discuss that. I mean, this body has already approved 3 other projects, none of which, the 3 did not go through what you're suggesting.
I don't know that. I didn't ask that
Well,
question.
we know that they didn't, we know that we passed them as a body, and they're already in place and hopefully being successful, and we know one of them is now become a new icon of the city, in the whether we like the chandelier or don't like the chandelier, it's become an icon for the community. I'm not gonna get off of that one.
It wasn't a loan, though. It was forgivable.
As is one of the 3 that's being presented to us here. So with that, that was our background to tee it up as to the 3 projects. And those who are out there in the audience, I will I'll let you make a recommendation as to which of the 3 you'd like to. The chair will take it whatever sequence you'd like to take them.
Well, Mr. Chair, how about if we
Because you
just
can only
take them in order?
upset 2 out of the 3 that way.
You've moved the agenda around a lot today, so we'll be happy to take it as is.
Okay? We'll go.
Just introduce, we've gone through some of the program goals and objectives, so I won't reiterate that, except to say you're going to see 3 projects today that we think meet a very high threshold for their impact and timeliness. Note that the 2 private projects are loans. The one that is a project with Downtown Cleveland Alliance would be a forgivable loan, meeting certain criteria. But I'm pleased to present these to you, and so I'll just get out of the way and let the agenda carry on.
Okay, if we can read into the record the first item, which is 0270.
Resolution number 2014-0270, a resolution authorizing the Casino Revenue Fund loan in the amount not to exceed $1,500,000 to Downtown Cleveland Alliance for the benefit of the Streetscape Improvement Project located in the Gateway and Warehouse Districts in the City of Cleveland, authorizing the Deputy Chief of Staff of Development or Director of Development to execute all documents consistent with said loan and this resolution.
Is there someone here to speak on the Downtown Cleveland Alliance proposal? Two someone's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. Sarah's going to pull up something. I think you actually have a handout in front of you. So she's going to pull it up so everybody can see. My name is Tom Storinsky. I am the Associate Director of the Historic Warehouse District Development Corporation and the Historic Gateway and Neighborhood Corporation. I'm here on behalf of those two organizations, as well as Joe Marinucci and Downtown Cleveland Alliance, to share with you a brief overview of the projects that were before you. Just really quick about Downtown Cleveland Alliance. You probably know them very well. They manage a special improvement district for all of downtown, very well-known Clean and Safe program, as well as projects that work toward economic development opportunities, as well as downtown branding and marketing initiatives. A little bit about the Gateway District and the Warehouse District. We are neighborhood-based partners of Downtown Cleveland Alliance, the community-based aspect of downtown development that we've facilitated over $1 billion of development and historic preservation since the early 80s, and we're very proud of that. And we also do a lot of business technical assistance and neighborhood marketing, neighborhood-based marketing and events. And very much so, we have community-based planning and urban design work in both those respective neighborhoods. And you can see those up on the projects we're talking about up on the screen now. So with DCA and Gateway and Warehouse, public realm is a very, very important aspect of continuing the momentum of downtown development. In January 2014, DCA took a leadership role and started the strategic vision that we know as Step Up Downtown now. And it was all about linking and enhancing development in public spaces and destinations downtown, really leveraging the private investments, the housing developments and the major developments, and the major infrastructure projects from the bridge to the lakefront to Public Square, and making sure we're connecting all those things and doing what we can to help them thrive. The plan lasted for most of the spring, and it required it entailed a market analysis as well as a very very robust community engagement process, and it led to 18 projects that were priorities for the downtown community, focusing, like I said, on downtown, connecting the downtown assets for a more walkable and bikeable environment, and the people that were living and working downtown today, and responding to the trends of the movement toward downtown and downtown living, where we have over 13,000 people living downtown, and a daytown population of over 120,000. So specific to the projects that we're looking at, if you refer to your the document in front of you, what we did when DCA and Gateway and Warehouse got together to start talking with Nate and Sarah is that we wanted to come to the county with a comprehensive set of initiatives that were ready to go. So not really focusing on the 18, but focusing on the projects that were ready to go, and we're ready to in strategic areas that we're leveraging the investments that were happening, like the projects that will follow me. So really quickly, in the Warehouse District projects, we are, the 2007, the Warehouse District had a public realm plan, and we've been working toward implementing that slowly but surely along the way with streetscape projects and public art projects. And this infusion of money will help us leverage that with entry gateway elements, more public art, and then a very strategic partnership and investment with folks at Flats East Bank and on the main avenue in lighting that in an artistic way. Having a park that celebrates the Cleveland's original lighthouse at the top of the hill, and creating a very seamless transition between the two districts, celebrating industrial heritage, and and making it a safe and artistic environment. In the Gateway District, again, there's a community process with residents and property owners and merchants there, and they are working to enhance the district and create some signature streetscape elements throughout the district, with a signature element with what we're calling Walkway Park. It's a walkway between Prospect and Huron around what's currently still a dedicated street, but it's meant to be always a parkway as the city legislated it. And the community came together and said, well, this is a really great walkway, but why can't it be a place that's an amenity for the residents in the district and the workers in the district? And it's fortuitous that we're already collaborating with Stark Enterprises on the development they're doing to give that element of their project a Gateway District aspect to it, and we're really proud of that. So that's a really quick overview. I'm glad to answer questions before or after, however you want to do that. That's my project.
Gateway Park, is that a street that's been vacated? Is that?
Yeah, it's actually not been vacated. What actually happened was you'll know it as the walkway between Prospect and Huron with the red structured lights over it. The city actually chose not to vacate it, and in a development agreement with the property owner at the time of the Gateway Sports Complex, left it as a street, but to maintain it as a walkway, as a part of the urban design work of the Gateway Sports Complex to maintain north-south connections in the neighborhood. And it's really a very smart thing, because with the historic preservation work that we facilitated and the urban planning work that they've done, it's made the Gateway District what it is today in terms of the development and the momentum we've carried.
So not being vacated, it could go back into public service at some point along the way?
Theoretically, but the way the city has maintained it with the development agreement, and the way we're talking with the city's talking with Bob Stark that he can go into further detail, that's not likely, because the community is not likely to let that happen.
That's similar to the steps over by the warehouse? Where the lighthouse steps are? Is that a vacated section?
It is not, actually. The steps is a historic element that still exists along the sidewalk, and the plan is a creative plan to steal space along that sidewalk, and in a partnership with the current property owner to articulate that space as a park space, as a gathering space, and be the public element that hands people down into the Flats East Bank under the Main Avenue Bridge.
Questions from the committee members? Yes, Mr. Brady?
Yes. There are lots of different bits and pieces to this. It's intriguing, but I don't feel like, on the basis of this piece of paper, that I can come anywhere near understanding, what we're talking about here exactly, and also that the renditions are, I really can't. I almost have to use my imagination to use this piece of paper to imagine what this might be or not be. I get the general idea.
Okay.
What other bodies would this have to go for? I mean, this is downtown Cleveland, so what other bodies does this have to go for in order to get not just funding, but clearance?
Approval?
Sure.
It would go, it's in the Downtown Land Protective District as it relates to the city of Cleveland's, and it would go through design review. Elements in the warehouse district would actually go to the Landmarks Commission. And we're in full partnership. There was representation from the city of Cleveland on every single one of the committees that I managed. So the city planning staff are already aware of these projects. So that would be basically the review aspect of it. And to your point about the vision, these are projects that are ready to go, but for clarity's sake, there's still some design work that needs to get done on them for the park, and we have secured funding for the Lighthouse Steps Park and the Main Avenue Bridge element through the Cleveland Foundation to do a design competition to take the concepts that you see to make them amazing and real. We are, for the Gateway park, we have enlisted the work of Tom Hubbard, who's an artist. He just put some work up in the Larchmere area in their streetscape project that they did, just completed. And we're going to be working with Bob Stark's group to give that element of his project, Gateway District personality. So there's still some work to be done, especially like the black and white drawings that you see are the concepts that we used to hire Tom, but we're already working with him to refine that and work with Bob.
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that if you went before one of these other bodies about one of these specific projects, that you would have something more than what's before me today in order to get their approval.
Absolutely.
So what comes first? I mean, is the chicken and egg kind of a situation? Do we supposed to fund these projects without much information, and then other forums or boards approve them with more specific information, knowing the funding's in place, or do they say we would do this if the funding was available, and then you come to us and ask us if we're willing to pay for it? I mean, because this is all being paid for out of the casino funding, right? I mean, is there any other funding?
Absolutely. To be clear, our part of the criteria that Kelly has put on is that you're actually only paying 25% of the total project cost.
Then it's a relevant question.
And your what you're seeing before you are the projects that we've put and discussed with Sarah and Nate about the projects that the county would be funding specifically. But there's other projects that that you're not seeing before you that are part of the overall budget that we've created for the 25%.
All right, so I guess, Mr.
Show
Chairman.
$3 million of fundraising and $1.5 million from the city, so. I think
Where
It's
is
actually $6 million of fundraising
Where is
and
that? Where is
$4.5
that?
million.
Just to-
Two of the attachment, if you keep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
all
on the
right, that makes sense. So I guess, I feel like the blind guy who's trying to figure out what the elephant is, however that children's story goes. We need a bigger, more complete picture.
It's very similar to what we have with the bridge at this point in time.
But the bridge is one thing. It's
Concept of the city's money is also on this sheet of paper, and fundraising money is on this sheet of paper. And those are the kind of questions you're at.
And DCA and Warehouse District and Gateway District are fully committed to raising those funds. I think how we're working with this in a fairly typical scenario in the nonprofit world is we create the concepts, and the pretty pictures, if you will, to use that to fundraise toward. It's kind of a little bit of a chicken and the egg. It's like if we do the work and the construction engineering and all that work, you need the money to actually get to that point. Part of the budget in there is actually construction engineering work that needs to get done.
Mr. Chair, one important addition that I'd like to add is that this is contingent upon securing the funds from the other entities. So you'll see in the write-up that they have to get the funds before the county lets any dollars, reflecting some of the feedback from recent discussions.
Yeah, and my only analogy to the bridge was we have that same problem with the bridge, and the bridge at this point in time is in a hold because we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with the city on moving forward out there. Mr. Miller was next, I think. Unless, Mr. Brady, I didn't mean to cut.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to find my way through this, and you were conjuring up images in my mind of the three choices we apparently have for the bridge that have been printed twice in the paper.
My question is for the director or for the chief, either one. Director Kelly, chief. As I understand this project, this is about connecting the dots and providing the kind of neighborhood amenities needed to take full advantage of the larger projects that are being developed in this general space. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that that this is exactly the kind of thing that we gave $1.5 million a year for 40 years to Positively Cleveland for through the bed tax, and And my question,
Mr. Chair, Councilman, I would disagree. I don't think that Positively Cleveland does this sort of physical development. The extension of the bed tax now gives them funds and a mandate that they commit funds to capital improvements. But that's new, and I believe that begins at a point in the future.
my question was only as to whether we had any capability to approach Positively Cleveland to make some of that money available for this project and conserve casino revenue money for some other project for which that source might not be available.
A fair question.
Yeah, and as I recall, there was a presentation that streetscape and mapping and getting around were part of the presentation that was made to us when the folks from Positive Cleveland made their presentation of. Now, I don't know whether this is signage. It's tough to look. Tough to see what these small drawings and stuff like that, as far as whether this is signage or this is strictly art and not only strictly art, but it's art as opposed to get around, move around.
There's streetscape amenities, and then the warehouse strict entry element would be signage similar to the gateways that you funded with Playhouse Square. And then it's different than what Destination Cleveland is doing now with their wayfinding elements. That the prototypes are out there right now. Those are pedestrian wayfinding to get people from point A to point B. Our project would be more amenities and amenities for people to use.
I didn't mean to butt in. Simon, you were next on the list.
I can't see the transformational aspect of this project from this piece of paper, and I guess I'm on the same page with Councilman Brady. This seems to be public art aesthetics, and how is that transformational, and how do we justify the use of these casino revenue for making something look better when we have really ailing communities that are desperate to have their brownfields turned around? I don't see this.
So the elements that are presented today are the elements that would be attached to county funding. I think it warrants a conversation, as you can see, the big picture. Oftentimes in economic development projects, we will fund a small phase of a larger project. And we present to you the larger project and then tell you, well, our collateral is attached to this particular part of the building, et cetera. And so in this instance, I think that what we need to do is come back to you with all of the exhibits so you can see the bigger picture, the elephant, and we'll make sure that that happens before.
And I like the analogy. The analogy is a good analogy.
Except for those Republicans showing up in the fall. I wish I hadn't said that. So
does
we'll
Dan.
commit to that next.
Okay, then why don't we will leave that at this point in time, because it sounds to me as though the 1.5 million in conjunction with the $6 million total package is only a piece of what it is. This body has been positive in supporting projects that make sense. So I'm not going to give you an anticipation of how this body is going to vote, but I think with the right message and the right presentation, the right everything as far as showing it being transformational, it was hard for us initially to see, I think a lot of us, for how that chandelier was going to be transformational, but no one can doubt that transformed as far as in the eyes of everybody coming to this town. So whether or not it's the right way to spend money is a different question, but it was transformational in that respect for that quadrant out there. And as long as you're still on the microphone, one of the elements that we're being asked to support is $1.5 million on the basis of fundraising. This was the same conversation we had around that chandelier. What is the status of the fundraising of that success so that we can have because it's the same body that were being discussed, that the Cleveland Foundation was monies that went in supposedly into that $16 million in to transform that. And I just heard their name being used as being the funder for part of that $3 million. So I'd love to see whether or not, when people come here and say, there's private funding that's going to make up the bulk of these, how successful has been historically? Next time when you come back, bring us up to speed as to saying, yes, here's our track record. When we pitched this to you, private funding says they're going to do this. They were successful and they did raise the money so that we can feel as though when our money goes in that, yeah, the private money is there to do what they said it was going to do. Because sometimes the public dollars get in there and the private dollars don't necessarily find their way. Yes, Mr. Miller?
Chief, can you say something about the time urgency of any of the three projects and specifically whether any of them you're looking for a final legislative approval of any of these three resolutions before the end of the year?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman, we've set expectations that there needs to be 3 readings. It's tradition, and council's going to deliberate as need be. So all of the projects have their own urgencies for different reasons. And so I'll let them share that, but we think that they're urgent insofar as we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on the speed of getting things done and keeping the trajectory going. And so I don't think that, and I reserve the right to be corrected, I don't think that there's any immediate deadlines that we'd be worried about, period.
Then an updating on this, just we're not necessarily getting the other 2 projects out there. If you can give us the timeline as far as the fundraising, which we don't need that tonight. The timeline as far as what the city's funding is going to, where that status is. Has it even been submitted to city council? Where are they on that process? We know that just following the bridge project, sometimes these things don't move at the speed to which the presenters would love it to. And then to Mr. Brady, the timeline of these design elements as to have they even been submitted to their body and what's the status within that body? So when we can present those 3 answers to the other 2 funding components and then the design component as to where it sits. Is it something that has been, unlike the bridge, where I think the bridge has been held out as being a component of the RNC coming here, are these components in any place in any of the proposals that have gone forward saying these are critical or very important to the RNC having a successful event here? I don't see these unfortunately falling into that category, but I'd love to hear from the presenter.
Not specifically. I mean, I think there's an impetus from the fundraising standpoint that that might help some of our work in fundraising in meeting that timeline. And obviously, with the Stark project, we need to follow his development. We're no way going to hold up the work of that. So, not specifically, but I think it might be part of our strategy in fundraising.
Yeah. What's your best case for as far as the design approval, as far as speed to when you actually get Mr. Brady's answer?
Ironically, and not because of the RNC, but I think that's, I think a lot of these projects will hit in that 2015, late 15, early 16.
Approval or
timeframe.
finished?
Finished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good luck on your approval process.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. If we can read the next one into the record, please.
Resolution number 2014-0271, a resolution authorizing a casino revenue fund loan in the amount not to exceed $4 million to Landmark May for the benefit of the May Company Building Project located at 158 Euclid Avenue, Cleveland, authorizing the Deputy Chief of Staff of Development or Director of Development to execute all documents consistent with said loan in this resolution.
And I assume somebody's going to speak on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to kind of set the stage for what this project is and with your permission.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
So very briefly, this is a project in converting the May Company building that has been vacant for a long, long time. They're in pursuit of a commitment of historic tax credits. This is why we have the urgency around time to make sure that we have a commitment there. We can talk about that. But this is a site it's almost 16 acres of floor space inside the Higbee building. 350 apartments, 387 parking spaces, and a total project cost well over $100 million.
You do mean the May Company building, right?
Yes, did I say something different?
You said Higbee building, but that's okay.
They're all the same to me. Green building.
No Silver Grill.
Target opening, of course, before the RNC convention. They're looking at a city TIF, about 500 construction jobs to be created during the construction period. This is a project that is a historic building, constructed, or architect was Daniel Burnham, a name that is familiar to all of us. And similar to the project that we just heard about, it helps to connect some of the districts that have really blossomed over the past couple of years. And so I think it's a critical piece to help with Public Square, downtown, and connecting some of the investments that we've already made.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my name's John Carney. I'm one of the developers of, and one of the general partners of Landmark May, along with my two partners, David Goldberg and Bob Rains, who are here today. You may know from background that Bob and I, since 1991, have done 6 historic rehab projects in Cleveland. One of them's actually right at Shaker Square, but the rest of them are all in downtown Cleveland. And they've all been completed successfully. We've gotten the tax credits. We haven't really been audited, except on one word with respect to a conservation easement, which we're not using. Basically, this particular project, in summary, the May Company is a Daniel Burnham building. It was built in 1915. I'll go through this relatively quickly. It's been vacant mostly for 20 years. And it did, for a certain period, have key bank in the center floors of the building with some back room operations. That's now moved, so it's completely vacant. You may ask yourselves why such a strategically placed and significant building, and if you just look at the 2 facades on Prospect and on Euclid, you can see that it's a significant building, why that hasn't been dealt with in the past. And part of it is the owner is a particularly difficult man to deal with. He's in the real estate business, but there have been a number of prominent developers who have tried and haven't succeeded. We entered into a contract with him in October of 2013. We had a large gap to fill on this project. But basically, it's as we said, it's going to be approximately plus or minus 350 units. We're still working with that. They're going to be high-end units, maybe not quite what's next door in the 9, but we have hired the Geist companies to be our design and construction on that project. So we hope to get the same kind of speed they built this building and took care of the 9. Jonathan Sandvik is our historical consultant and really came up with a conceptual plan on how to do the May Company building. Sarah, how do I change some of this? This is a picture of the facade, but I've got some of the area, and that's another pretty picture of the facade. Yeah, I want this one. Okay, yes. So this just locates the building, and you can see it's in red. And the other thing that's located on this particular map of downtown, the blue areas are undeveloped parking lot space or open space in the downtown. Now, one of them has been purchased by Mr. Stark, and they're going to explain their program. But the rest of them are vacant, and we believe that the May Company project is going to be catalytic with respect to many, if not all of these. If you also look on here, it's kind of small. I don't know if you have a copy of it in front of you, but there are some arrows. We needed to fill the gap. We need to get the state legislature to change the criteria and the law for historic tax credits in Ohio. Federal tax credits have no cap. Ohio state historic tax credit have a $5 million cap. And we've already been awarded $5 million by the state in December of 2013, a year ago. But that's not enough to get this project done. It wasn't enough to get the 9 done, but the 9 was done at a time when there was no cap. So we worked with the legislature and with the governor's office, and the law permitting what they call a catalytic certificate, that's something that can be awarded once every 2 years, passed the legislature and was signed by the governor in June. Now, they can't make a law for any one project. So we have applied for it. September 30th was the date. There are 3 projects in contention. One of them is in Akron, and one of them is the Huntington building, and then our building. Sometime this month, we're going to find out who got the catalytic certificate. We feel we've got a very competitive application in, and we feel we have a real good chance of getting that. Primarily, and the key criteria there, because you're looking at criteria today, is what is going to be its impact within a 2,500-foot radius. That's why this particular map is so important, because there are so many vacant, underutilized spaces within that area that we believe this will have a catalytic impact on. And hopefully the state will agree with us. Take a look at the next slide, if I got it up there. Yes, this one was put out by the Group Plan Commission, but we added the May Company project to their map just to show its location. And of course, it was designed by Daniel Burnham, built in 1915. It was only, I think, 4 stories tall at the time, or maybe 5, and then they added 2 or 3 stories in the 30s. It doesn't even look like it when you look at the facade, but they actually built onto it, and there's even room to build on some more. But all of the different organizations, including the Group Plan Commission, wrote letters of recommendation for our project to the state in connection with this catalytic certificate. And, one of the keys is if we can get the project going, and our drop dead date, we have 2 drop dead dates coming up. December 31st is one of them. From the point of view of the seller, we have to have the catalytic certificate by then. And for us to extend that through March 30th of next year, which is when we hope to start construction, we have to basically make $200,000 non-refundable payment to the seller. But you can see its relation to Public Square, to the group plan, to the Burnham original plans. The other 2 slides that I brought actually show typical floors. Now, Mr. Kelly related that each of these floors is over 2 acres. When you get the total, it's just hard to remember how large the May Company building is. Each floor is 97,000 square feet. So an acre is what, 43,560. You can do the math. They're over 2 acres. And what we're buying from the seller is everything above the first floor. He's keeping the first floor in the basement and part of the second and third floors. So one of the difficulties in developing this building, and if I'm going too long, cut me off, is that it's so large, and on the west side of the building, there's only a 10-foot alley, and that 10-foot alley is partially covered by the garage on Prospect, and so you couldn't really put windows of units there. So how do you use this massive space? And Jonathan Sandvik, well, maybe give me the next one first, came up with the idea of putting an atrium in the center. So if you take a look at here, at the top of the screen is facing east. And at this particular level, which is a 6th floor, there will be balconies facing east. They're inset balconies. And then 2 rows of units facing this atrium. Now, it's a very large atrium. It's as wide as most downtown streets. I think it's wider from one unit to the other than East 4th Street, for instance. Jonathan Sandvik says you'll be kind of like looking across West 6th Street. And we have units along Prospect, units along Euclid, and then the interior units. And if you'd go back down to the other one, this is the 5th floor. The atrium starts at the 6th floor, so the atrium is 6, 7, and 8. The 5th floor and the floors below, because it's all interior space, it only has units at the edges. So on this particular floor plan, I'm not going to take you through all of them. You can see we have units on 3 sides. The floor below that, there are no windows on the east, so it's all parking. And the parking enters off Prospect.
So the white is the parking garage?
Pardon?
The white in this?
Yes, that's parking spaces. That's parking spaces, and as you go down to the next floor, it's almost all parking except what we have on Euclid and Prospect where we have outside windows. Just a couple other things. We provided a study from Cleveland State University Urban School to the state for economic impact over 10 years. The numbers are super large over a 10-year period based on their criteria, and that's all been submitted to the state. The total cost of this project is in the range of $130 million. We've been working very closely with our contractor in order to try to bring some of our costs down, but we are where we are, and it costs X dollars to do this. A historic rehab, we brought up the Republican National Convention. They're not going to see the inside of this building. It will be completed by then if we can start March 31st, and there will be people living in it, but it won't be full. But the facades on Euclid Avenue facing Public Square and the facade on Prospect, which are terracotta, will be completely rehabilitated to their historic look. Plus, a lot behind the terracotta is crumbling and needs to be replaced. So a historic rehab, you get tax credits and everything that help make the project go, but you also spend a lot of money on various items that if you weren't trying to get historic tax credits, you wouldn't do. And part of the reason the government has given the historic tax credits is to try to preserve these buildings and do what's called adaptive reuse. So all of these projects in downtown, you've seen a number last year evidently. Bob and I have been doing them since 1990. They all require some public help, mostly in the form of loans. And our capital stack here requires a loan from either a private lender or it might be FHA, we're not sure yet. And then we have state and federal historic tax credits, which on this project are pretty massive. And we're trying to get EB5 financing, which is a type financing that basically has a 7-year due date on it. And this project will be stabilized by then. And it's at that time that our plan is to refinance and pay off the EB5 as well as your loan. We're also going to apply to the state of Ohio because they have a number of different loans for demolition and other things that happen in buildings like this. And we're in the process working with GCP to get that taken care of. The final thing is we're going to have probably with the number of units we have, 450 to 500 residents. And of course, those residents pay income tax. And we do have, the city of Cleveland's already passed the tax abatement or approved the tax abatement for this project. So we have city of Cleveland support in that manner, and they wrote us a letter to the state also. With that, I think.
I just wanted to color in that the proposed number is 4,003,000. It's contingent upon getting the tax credits that was talked about, and we'd be in a good position where we would be in the same spot as the EB5 investment that Mr. Carney talked about.
You talking about on the security status?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what position is that in regards to how many people will be in front of us?
Well, you're going to have a first mortgage in front of you. The tax
Right.
credit money is equity money. And then you're going to have yourselves, EB5, and maybe some of these state loans in our current capital stack.
Questions? Mr. Brady?
Yes, how much is the city's property tax abatement for?
It's for, well, they have a standard program. It might have passed council when you were there. that, you know, when you apply, they go through and make sure you've complied with its terms, and I think it's now 12 years.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean the amount. I do remember all that discussion, starting with 30 years down to a lot less. No, what I was referring to is this particular abatement is for what is the amount of taxes being abated?
The amount of taxes being abated will be the increase in value of the property based upon the improvements we put into it. And just so you know, right now,
You must have some idea of what that would be, though.
well, it's going to be significant. I don't exactly, but I suppose if you, because, just because it cost $130 million to do this, it's not worth $130 million. That's why you need the tax credits and the low-interest loans and everything. It just isn't worth what it cost. But it's currently on the books for about $4 million right now. So the county and the city and my heart, the Port Authority, you know, are all based on the $4 million. And that number will remain the floor, and then the extra money will be abated until such time as it runs off. Now, we did a project called Bridgeview. I've just had to talk to the county about its valuation. But when we bought that project, it was paying less than $100,000 a year in real estate taxes, and it wasn't even paying them. It was delinquent. That's a building at the corner of St. Clair and West 9th. There's now 247 units there, indoor parking. Our tax abatement has expired. It's gone by, and we're paying about $800,000 a year in real estate taxes now. So, I mean, that's what happens, but it's deferred 12 years.
And the tax credits that you're asking the state for, what does that amount to?
The tax credits are based on 25% of the qualified rehabilitation cost. So just for ease, let's say it's $100 million. In this case, it might be 120, but let's say 100 million. The federal tax credits are 20% of that number, and there's no cap. So if it's 120 million, let's use that number. The 20% is 24 million. Is that right? Yeah, 24 million, and that is what it would be. With the 25%, there's a cap at 100 million, so it can't be more than 25 million. And the investor who puts the money in, we're talking to banks. I mean, we've had, since Bob and I have been doing this, BP did one of ours, Sherwin-Williams done a couple of ours, Parker Hannifin has done ours, National City has done ours. So we've had different investors, and we're working with them all right now. But so the state tax credit, 25 million max, people are now paying about 80 cents on the dollar, so that would net us about $20 million. And the federal, that's negotiable. Typically we're getting 90, 92 cents, and now there are some lenders or some investors are paying up to 110% because it's been structured differently. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yes, you did, thank you. I'll hold for, let some other people take a shot at you here.
Just a quick question on the current owner's control and ownership of the first floor and basement. Would that impact or thwart any of your ideas for the project? Or I'm just concerned that unilaterally there might be something which would impede the progress of this. Are people going to go in on the second floor or have to transgress through the first?
No, I can answer that. I didn't bring the first floor plan, but we actually have ingress, egress at all four corners of the building. The current main entrance on Euclid will be one of our main entrances, and then the main entrance towards the casino on Prospect will be our other entrance, because there are a lot of units, so people will be going up 2 elevator banks. And then at the other side of the building on Prospect, the east side of the building, near East 4th, that's going to be where the parking enters. And believe me, we have provisions in our contract that'll run with the land, because we limit the noise that can be if there are any clubs in there. We have decibel limits. He is required to do all of his rehab in that building to historical standards. Because if he didn't, we could lose all of ours. So, yes, we've got that buttoned up. We think.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Brady?
I think this, like, from what I'm hearing, is the question here whether we pass this, whether we appropriate this loan before the end of the year? And are you saying that the loan has to be, we have to prove that the loan is available in order for the tax credits to be considered? Because I certainly hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I would direct that to the applicant.
Yes, no. In other words, they are considering it right now
And you're
based
still in
on what we
competition, and you're
submitted.
still in competition with other.
Yes, and it will
other
happen
projects.
this month, so keep your eyes open. Typically, we don't find out about it before the newspapers, so this project was announced in the newspapers. We didn't want it announced in the newspapers. You know, early on, we were negotiating, and there it was. So somehow these things get out. But no, so your loan wouldn't happen unless we get the certificate.
And if you don't get this certificate,
If we don't get the certificate, we're discussing Plan B. And Plan B would only be that we'd have to figure out a way to acquire the building, because I don't think the current owner is going to give us an extension for 2 years. And I don't see why the state of Ohio has decided when they could issue another one of these certificates in June. They have the ability legislatively to issue this in June. They've just administratively decided we're going to wait until July of 2016. And Plan B would be to go back to the state and say, please issue this the earliest date you can under your authority, under the statute. And then 6-month delay, that would be a Plan B. It's not something that we've even broached with them yet. We don't want them to think we're thinking we're not going to be the best project.
I think this question goes actually maybe to someone else, but I'm not quite sure who, maybe Mr. Bender, maybe Mr. Kelly. There is a window for construction because of the national convention. There's a window, not just in order to get things done, but there's some sort of a prohibition against I think prohibiting construction after a certain point in time, so there won't be construction going on during the convention. Am I correct?
Yeah, I've heard the same thing that you've heard, and I know that that's being
Where are
managed
we
through
hearing this
the
from?
permitting process to make sure that things like scaffolding is down and others in order to meet the requirements for the convention. So that would be the burden of the developer to make sure they get on time. Nothing motivates like a deadline.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In the event that the tax credits are not issued to this project, and they go to one of the other two projects that's in the running, what is the status of your project at this moment as far as being able to hit a March takeoff date?
You mean right now?
Yes.
If we get it, we will
If
be
you know,
able to-
if you fail, if it doesn't go your way.
If we don't, then the earliest they could possibly do it again would be, in June or July of 2015. And that would take a policy review at the state level, which they may be willing to do. I mean, everybody supported that
So,
legislation.
well, I guess maybe one specific, your project goes on hold at least until after you hear whether a second round of credits are issued and you get picked up in the second round.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
so-
correct.
so
Yeah, it's not a
if-
good
If we will know
result.
by January 1st whether or not this project is going to go with a takeoff of a March 1st construction or March 30th, I don't remember what you.
Right, absolutely. As I told you, we've got to put up
Okay.
$200,000 non-refundable on December 31st, so
Okay, well, that's your part of the anxiety level, not ours.
it is, I know.
Now, this sheet of paper shows $111 million. It doesn't show 130. I assume that someplace along the way, Mr. Carney's numbers are probably better than these on this sheet of paper. Is that?
When we started, the application materials have that number.
It's okay. It's just,
So
I
we'd
just,
rather be conservative than,
well, this is not,
we'd rather under-promise and over-deliver.
well, no, but this says the total cost of the project is the other way around. I would rather it be 130 and know that that's the scope of the project. This is what he said.
At current level, that's about what it is. And we did submit that, so if they didn't get you the most current one,
I'm just reading what's
only
on the
got-
sheet of paper in front of us. I
right,
think it
okay.
says,
It's, you know what, this is a moving target. It's a very
Sure.
large project, and we are doing high-end units, much higher end than anything we've done prior downtown. And so it is costing us some more.
okay. Yes, Mr. Miller?
If the council were to pass this legislation now, would it do anything to enhance your prospects of getting the state certificate approval, or do their criteria have nothing to do with other funding?
Oh, no. It's very important that we have local support. So from the city of Cleveland, we were able to give our letter of tax abatement, which is real money. And we got a recommendation letter from the city. From the county, we got a recommendation letter, and the county indicated that we had applied for this and they were considering it. So there's nothing that can happen now. September 30th was the date, so nothing we do to further that is going to count any more than what we already have.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Carney.
Chairman.
Yep.
So that
Thank you
helps-
very, well,
Okay, and that does help me. So we're sort of out front with $111 million being the total cost, and ours is $4 million. Those senior lenders, where are you with them? Who are they, and where are you in the process with?
well, I'm gonna look at the ones I have, which are total more, but conceptually, it's relatively the same. We have about $20 million in state tax credit money. That's 80% of 25 million. We have about $27 million in federal tax credit money. That's 20% of a larger number. We have $4 million from you. We have a $50 million first mortgage loan. And we have $6 million from the state. Now, we're talking to the state. We don't have that committed yet. That's what we're trying to get. And we say state of Ohio or other. And we have another, something called the deferred developer fee. Just so you know, that's a qualified, developer fees are qualified, right? So, and there's a certain number you can put in for federal and state tax credit purposes, whether you intend to pay it or not, and other than over time. So we use a real large number for that. And, but it won't get paid, and nor will even part of it get paid till the project's done and up and operating. But those are basically the sources. We're putting in $1.5 million to $2 million in cash, of which we've already got about $500,000 invested, real money.
You mentioned 50 million was a
First mortgage loan.
first mortgage loan. Okay, and that is already secured.
We have a letter from a lender that we had to submit with the state tax credit approval, but we are talking to other lenders now because there's a big market out there, and one of the keys is to get not just a first mortgage loan, but get one that you can convert or that you have more time on so you can refinance it, because no one knows what the interest rate environment will be in 3 years.
And I'm just going to repeat the question, actually, when it comes to that, say, 50 million, does our commitment help you in that, in securing those dollars as well?
Absolutely, it will help with that, because that's in process. But that's fluid, that's moving right now, and, you know, you can't, it's a chicken and an egg. We had to get our construction costs pretty hard before we could really put numbers together to go to the lenders. So we've been doing that over the last few weeks.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much.
And I knew when we put 5 items on ultimately for discussion, it was going to be tough to do it in 2 hours. So I apologize for anybody that was thinking we were going to get out of here by 5. But we'll take the next item up and we'll go from there, as opposed to, the alternative is to come back, and that's not fair to the people who are here. Okay?
Chair, I have a question about the time sensitivity of the May Company project, what's the intention of the chair then if?
Chair will
we
keep
have
it in
tight-
committee, yeah.
Tight deadline, I think keep it in committee and come back before the end of the year?
I think that based on what we just heard from Mr. Carney is that the December 31st is a critical piece of information. There's no sense in us doing anything with it. If it fails there, his project is
Okay, that's
recasted as far as a date and a time and even money, I assume.
And
He
this
says
is-
that has
right.
to go down by the bottom floor. It would be my intention that, my assumption will be that if it fails, I don't want to speak for Mr. Carney or for the economic development, but my assumption is if it fails to get their support on December 31st, this project will get pulled from, because it'll be recast as a brand-new project.
Yes, and I hope we hear much before December 31st. I think the state will let everybody know kind of the middle of the month. And we will obviously talk to the staff and everybody that needs to know as soon as we know.
We will move at the speed to which you folks give us information. How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck.
That's all.
Good luck
Yeah,
with
we-
the
it's a-
state.
Thank you
It's a
very
terrific
much.
project. May Company was a special spot for me also, growing up. Next. And I apologize for the last group, but it's just so happened.
You know what they say, best for last.
Well, we'll find that out in a minute, I have a feeling. Here.
I'll be efficient with my word.
Let me just say one thing. Bob and I are partners in Crocker Park, and Bob is the poet developer, and what I said won't be anything like his presentation.
Okay, all right.
Resolution number 2014-0272, a resolution authorizing a casino revenue fund loan in the amount not to exceed $3 million to Gateway Huron for the benefit of the Gateway Huron project located at East 4th Street, Cleveland, authorizing the Deputy Chief of Staff of Development or Director of Development to execute all documents consistent with said loan in this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I won't step on any of the poet developer's lyrics, except to say that what we're proposing is, here, again, it's a loan, $3 million, significant contingencies, great ambitious project, and I'll get underway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was born in Cuyahoga
Please
County.
put your name on the record, sorry about that.
My name is Robert L. Stark. Please call me Bob. I'm a resident of Cuyahoga County. I was born here. I was raised here. I'm a graduate of Hawkins School and Case Western Reserve University School of Law. And I've spent my entire professional career in Northeast Ohio, much of which has been devoted to development work in Cuyahoga County, actually the majority of which. And this reference to me as a poet developer, which is something that is self-professed, is because my approach to development has always been to be lyrical and at the same time purposeful from the standpoint of doing something that would have, guess what, a transformational positive impact on the community within which we were developing. And, you know, if you want examples of that type of development, we set out to improve the quality of life, the standard of living in the eastern suburbs by buying a forlorn Eaton mini mall on Chagrin Boulevard in Woodmere and completely transforming it to a place where it is now a central place for people in the southeastern suburbs to come together on a regular basis. And we did the same thing in Westlake when we started and as we continue to develop Crocker Park. And we've done the same in Summit County, and we've done the same in Stark County, and Northeast Ohio is where we're from, and it's what we do, and it's what we continue to do. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that as a boy, even as a young law student, I always imagined, I dreamed of the day that would come, hopefully, if I was successful in my pursuits, where I could be standing at a podium like this and be talking about something that would be transformational for my hometown. Because when all is said and done, even though I grew up in Beechwood and I live in Beechwood, I'm a Clevelander. I'm a native Clevelander. I'm proud to be a Clevelander. I've always been here. I intend to stay here. My son has joined me in my business here. My grandchildren live here. And everything that we're going to talk about relative to Nucleus has a foundation in that, you know, genetic material or whatever it is that makes us proud to be Clevelanders. So how did we get involved with Nucleus? And by the way, I'm going to address you, or attempt to address you, not as a planning commission or as an architectural review board. I want to talk about transformational development for the county. And in fact, it's transformational development for the city, which in turn will impact the county. It'll change the way things are done. And it's transformational impact for the region of Northeast Ohio, and it's transformational impact for the state. And the governor knows that in the conversations that I've had with him about what this concept is about. So we call it Nucleus. New Cleveland Us. CLE, right? New is NU, but it's NEW, us. And it's not about Bob Stark's project or Bob Stark's development. I'm a facilitator. I'm an agent, a crusader, in this case more than a poet, who is hell-bent on taking what we've done to date, which is remarkable. You know, the resurgence of residential population in our downtown by the conversion of warehouse buildings and office buildings and the like, and the resurgence of dining and entertainment that is, you know, sitting squarely on the shoulders of chef-owned and operated restaurants, and we have this great culinary community and culture going on that has fueled this possibility for rebirth. It's fueled by, you know, innovations like the casino itself, the investments in the community by Dan Gilbert, and so on and so on and so on. So what we're proposing is to make us more aware, to magnify and most importantly connect all of that great work that has been done over the last 15 to 20 years to the nucleus, so that everything is interconnected. And in so doing, we concretize that impact, and we make a new statement, and we take it to another level. So I'm going to give you examples of what I mean. First of all, what is the connectivity about? Immediately, this is a unique situation. I don't believe anything like this exists anywhere else in the United States of America, where we're a four-sided site that has tremendous anchors, generators, I call them, on all four sides, starting with the East 4th Street Entertainment and Restaurant District, okay? Looking to the immediate west, we're talking about the casino, we're talking about the investment in and what Public Square is going to represent and what Dan Gilbert will eventually build, you know, on the river bank that's only a block away from where we're talking about. You know, the density and the potential for density that has. And by the way, people are asking the question, when is that going to happen? When are they going to build that new casino? Everybody asks that question, and I'll tell you when. When Nucleus generates thousands, if not millions, of visitors that also go to the casino and raise their revenues by $100 million. And that will happen. That's one of the impacts that Nucleus is going to have that's going to reverberate and create more impact. To our south, we have the Q, and we have Progressive Field. And the Q in particular last year, with a lousy basketball team, drew 5.5 million people itself. And the Gilbert organization keeps working on increasing those numbers for events other than basketball. And as we know, this year, just the return of LeBron James and the competitiveness of the team will probably add another 2 million people to that. And to the east, we may have the most important adjacency, and that's 9th Street in the financial district, which adds 150,000 people within spitting distance during the day who need the kind of amenity package that we're talking about. And then immediately to their east, Playhouse Square with its iconic chandelier, and immediately adjacent to that, Cleveland State University. And in the middle of all of this is Nucleus, New Cleveland Us. Nucleus is designed, was conceived, motivated me from the following place. Any real major league city in the global economy in the world, the global world that we live in. I mean, we have a gazillion needs on the parochial level, whether it's bridges or infrastructure or housing or whatever it may be. But what we have to address as a community so that we can attract and maintain the best and brightest, our children, our grandchildren, other people who have left that we want to bring back, other people that we want to attract to the city without a chip on our shoulder thinking, well, they would prefer going to Chicago or New York. Well, they shouldn't prefer going to Chicago or New York. But unless we make a quality of life statement that they can relate to, they'll continue to go to Chicago and New York. And this is our opportunity because we can coalesce everything that we've done around Nucleus. And we can, for the first time since I was a child in the 1950s, and there were national retailers and restaurants represented on Euclid Avenue. When Euclid Avenue was like walking down Fifth Avenue and you were shoulder to shoulder with people. And you know I'm telling the truth. So now we need to use connections, relationships, and an amazing development proposal with unbelievable anchors surrounding it. Without those anchors, without those generators, I couldn't propose to you anything that we're talking about. But with them, we can do something unbelievable. And that is on every edge of a four-sided development, which we're actually increasing to almost 6 sides, we have action on the street. Okay, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, we built buildings that forgot about what the street is about. This should be the opposite. There shouldn't be 1 inch of frontage of the buildings involved here that isn't active, that doesn't give people a reason to be there, and that isn't built with a different economic model in mind. And I'll give you another example. The chef-driven restaurants that are so successful in our city, if they have a model to do $4 million in sales, the national restaurants start at 7, 9, 11, 15 million. Now, what does that mean? That means that the millions of people that come to the queue and everybody else involved can be retained. They can be serviced. Right now, they can't be. So everybody says, well, there's this phenomenon, people come to an event and then they leave. Well, of course they leave. They can't be taken care of. There isn't enough, and the capacity of what exists isn't large enough. We can change that, and that's how big cities operate. The other thing that big cities in the new world economy, in the global economy do is they build iconic architecture. They let the world know that we're in the 21st century, and notwithstanding all of the magnificent stuff that's gone on here in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of the residential population, the restaurants, and everything else positive that we're looking at, you can't tell that anything has changed. You know, transformation takes on all kinds of dimensions, and one of the dimensions is physical. How do you transform the image, the identity of a community to say, hey, we're Cleveland, and we compete with Shanghai, and we compete with Hudson Yards, which is New York's attempt to be a 21st century city, okay? No less dramatic, no less impactful, and no less purposeful than what we're proposing to do as Nucleus. And for the same reason, like Millennium Park in Chicago when it was built. Even the great cities have to remake themselves, have to make these statements of relevance and currency, or else you get forgotten or you get relegated to tertiary status. You have no idea what it takes us to attract someone like Tiffany to Cleveland, Ohio, or North Face, or Anthropologie, or even Starbucks, which I did. When you mention Cleveland, the first words out of their mouth are, not on our radar. I'm so sick of that, you have no idea. Well, after Nucleus, it's going to be on everybody's radar. Because finally, we'll make a statement from our center city that is relevant to our county in the greatest way, in terms of our identity, in terms of our pride, in terms of our ability to attract, in terms of our ability to innovate, in terms of our creativity. For the first time, we'll be able to take advantage of everything we did by putting it together in a way that makes that expression, and no one will ever say, not on our radar again. They'll say, wow, Cleveland's a happening place. And that's the motivating factor here, even though the owner of the property that we were talking about was absolutely belligerent. You know, I was going to say intransigent, but belligerent. This owner from the West Coast couldn't care less about us. And I don't know, 6 or 7 different developers, including Dan Gilbert, 4 times tried to get this piece of property so that something could be done with it. I don't know why, except maybe the intention that is brought to bear on this whole thing, that this thing did finally fall for us. It also fell at a cost of $30 million in cash. Interestingly enough, it's the first time in my career where the magnitude of a project which you have on your application at $190 million, it's really going to be $400 million. That $190 million is for the amount of development that needs to be done between now and the Republican convention. There are 640 parking spaces there between a broken up surface parking lot and a decrepit parking facility, both of which have to be completely redeveloped in one way or another, torn down, okay? We're going to replace those parking spaces with 1,650 parking spaces or 1,550 parking, somewhere between 1,500 and 1,600 spaces, which not only is made necessary because of what we're developing, it's because the district needs more parking in order, it's an infrastructural question, but you have to see in advance what's going to happen in order to plan now for that infrastructure and allow it to happen. The infrastructure really has to come first. Okay, that goes a little bit to your question about the priority and impact of infrastructure. Another thing that we're doing, that we're proposing to innovate, which we hope will catch fire in the minds and hearts of the Cleveland community. This project is proposed to be in 2 blocks, and between the 2 blocks, which is that walkway which was discussed, okay, that walkway can't possibly be activated because the current garage has no front that can be activated, and just the configuration of what abuts it can't be. Theoretically, you could build on one side, but not on the other side. We're going to tear down the whole side that's got projects on it right now, and we're going to double load. Remember, every inch of frontage is going to be activated, and we're going to emulate what I witnessed in Australia, where in Melbourne they took all of their miserable, dark, scary, stinky, smelly alleyways, and they created incredible places out of them, and it became such an attraction, there must be 50 of them, that it draws millions of people to the city every year. Can you imagine, once we do this and we demonstrate how it's done, how it will impact the colonnade, right? Both colonnades. And take them to the next level, how it will impact the Grand Arcade, how it will impact the alleyway between the East Garage and the Q, which was originally designed to have retail or something on the ground floor of the garage, how it could impact the alleyway behind Progressive Field out to 9th Street. We're hoping that we will demonstrate that these spaces are important places for us to nurture and develop and be creative with, and that they will attract additional millions of people to our community. Mixed use. So we said the ground floor condition is about national retailers and restaurants. Above that, or sandwiched in the middle of the block where you'll never see it, but where it'll have great capacity, is where the parking goes. Above that is housing, in some cases housing, office space, hotel space, and more residential space. So we'll see towers that, like the one depicted there, that are, you know, in the 600 to 800 feet of height range that will generate great views. Oh, there's another thing, speaking of office space, that's really important to understand. Most of the office space in downtown Cleveland, as is true, unfortunately, in the suburbs, is obsolete. From the standpoint of the way business is done in offices today, almost, I'm guessing 98% of all office space in Cuyahoga County is obsolete. It is not constructed in the way that maximizes chance encounters between employees, that has a certain kind of open space and certain dimensions that are the culture of office work today. And certainly not downtown. I haven't been in Ernst & Young. I presume that it's much further advanced, and it may be perfect on the inside. But we need to create more of that because the demand is for that kind of space. And if that kind of space isn't produced, we're going to lose people. And we don't need to lose people, but we have a wonderful other phenomenon happening. And I'll give you an example of law firms. So law firms that are in older buildings, let's say in 150,000 square feet, and they're paying $23 a square foot, but a third of that space is not relevant and it's inefficient. So the miracle is that the total sum, let's say they're paying $1 million a year in rent for 150,000 square feet, whereas in a new building today, they want to live in 100,000 square feet of efficient and modern design office space. Now, instead of paying you $23 a square foot, they're paying you $35 a square foot, and they get close to being able to support iconic architecture and new construction for office space. That's a really remarkable phenomenon that's happening today. And then, of course, in the residential realm, the same is true. When we provide the first residences in downtown that have balconies, can you imagine all these conversions? Nobody can open up a door and step out of their unit and take a breath of fresh air. Doesn't exist. So that's all of these things add up to a statement, to a tremendous impact, and we can't do any of it unless it's a partnership, a public-private partnership. Just can't be done. So this is the beginning of one of those partnerships, I hope. I really do. I want you to know that all of those investors from outside of this area, mostly from the New York area, who understand what urban means and how important it is to a region, they're the people who put up, the bulk of that money to buy this land that couldn't be bought before. That's a good thing, that they're investing in us. That's outside the state money investing in us. That's another valuable result. If I can answer any questions, please let me know.
I think we have a lot of information here. To be honest, this is good. I guess one of the risks of being last, when you come in with the most information and documentation, it creates a challenge for it to be consumed and absorbed in a short period of time. I'll defer to.
So in that spirit, that is to say, we have many, many more questions than we are prepared to spend the time to ask. At the end, at the last page in the presentation here has some really, futuristic
Spectacular architecture.
in it. Are you saying that's what you have in mind?
Yes.
How many stories are we talking about?
Well,
Approximately.
One of the massings that we've done to date, I think, is about 35 stories. But they're not fixed yet. They're getting really close now. The tall one has a combination of retail on the ground floor, parking in the gray. Blue is office space with a green roof over it. Purple is a hotel. Yellow is rental housing, and the red or orange above it is for sale housing.
Well, it's fascinating. Last question from me today, because we're just scratching the surface. I know there must be a lot of what ifs involved in this project, like there would be anything on this scale. There is a large, a very significant redesigning of the the arena that's being discussed. Does any of this dependent on on that redesigning going forward?
No, absolutely not. And there's an interesting point about who they've hired to redesign that. There's a cadre of rock star architects out there that represent the kind of architecture you were looking at. One is the firm that they're using called Shop from New York. Another one from New York is called Big. Another one from Chicago is called Studio Gang. Those three are probably, you know, and and then there are a couple others right below them. And the fact is they're all hooked into this new 21st century architectural, which is true of every era, by the way. There are always these leading architects, and then they all follow suit with a certain style.
It doesn't sound like a law firm or anything.
Huh?
It doesn't sound like a law firm.
No, not at all. Yeah. So in any case,
Big does.
in any case, no, the architectural style that they're talking about and ours will absolutely complement each other and create even more of a positive impact and a 21st century impact.
But if you were successful, you would be able to do this within the next year and a half?
What we would do is we know we can produce the ground floor and the parking level, and that allows us to provide 1,650 very important parking spaces for the convention. They've told us how important they are versus the 640 that we have right now. The other thing that's a possibility, although they're considering whether or not they should put we were told that the convention is the second largest media event in the world next to the Olympics. And what that means is that the amount of international media and the demand for space, for office space and workers in big open spaces is huge. That one way they could solve it is by going to the convention center. But it's not the best way from the standpoint of public image. If they have something that's much closer, like across the street, that would help them tremendously. So we said, look, we could build the shell of that office space too, the blue stuff, in the same amount of time. We can't go beyond that, but if you want to use those open spaces, just let us know and we'll do that. So that's a possibility, but we're counting on building the parking and stopping, and so that parking is available. And then when I say stop, I mean, you're talking about a couple of weeks and then picking up. And what you'll do is you'll see this project open in earnest in 2017.
Okay.
Mr. Miller?
4th Street, by the way, doesn't stop at Prospect. It feels like it because we're so used to it. 4th Street is an entire edge of this project, okay? It's an entire edge. So what we're proposing to do, so you can see there's 4th Street, where, as we know it, move your marker down right into the intersection of Prospect and 4th Street. Steve, can you do that?
Yeah, you can see it pretty.
Okay, anyway, 4th Street extends right to the Q. And what we're hoping to do and what we're proposing to the city is to narrow 4th Street to the same dimension as the existing 4th Street, make it pedestrian from Prospect up until what's called Center Street there alongside of the parking garage. And then just like 4th Street today, you could pull in off of Huron with cars and then loop in, and the rest of it would be pedestrian. It's very, very exciting. We've gotten really nice preliminary feedback from the nationals.
Mr. Jones?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, okay.
I want to commend you on a very visionary project. And it's said that in real estate, there's 3 things that are important: location, location, and location. And you've certainly got that. I mean, it's just right in the middle of everything. And I'm sure a project of this scale, the funding mechanism is very complex, and I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about the other elements that need to go into to making this project go forward.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ryan Summers, who's working on a lot of this, to address that question.
Chairman, councilperson, It is going to be a complex capital structure, very similar to what you've seen with some of the other transformative projects downtown, like Flats East Bank, the Ameritrust redevelopment. We have had very positive response from the other public partners. In fact, tomorrow we're in front of Cleveland City Council for them to consider a TIF ordinance and some grants for the project. We are meeting with the state of Ohio later this week. We have our underwriting. It contemplates a large TIF. It takes into account the tax abatement. Hopefully, with your support, we'll also have this casino revenue funds and some monies from the state of Ohio. The private financing will probably come in the form from a national or regional bank, likely a group of banks, and will still require significant equity. We've maximized our underwriting in terms of the debt and the equity that can be supported by the project. But as we know, the current infrastructure requirements, the structured parking, and the construction costs still allow for a significant gap. We're lucky in that we're still in a very low interest rate environment, and that downtown housing is as strong as it is. But with all that said, we're confident we can get to the finish line with those main capital sources. And I'd be happy to answer any detailed questions. We're hoping to get this first round of funding done in first quarter of 15, so we can meet our construction schedule.
Okay, well, I just wish you the very best of success. I think what you're asking us to do is relatively modest. It's $3 million for 3 years, and then we get the money back, and we can get you on your way and recycle it into another project. So it looks great to me, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Stark, I just want to commend you as well. I enjoyed sitting here listening to the transformational conversation. We can get into the nuts and bolts all day long, and I'm sure, I know we will in the coming days and weeks. But again, I just want to commend you on the transformative work you're doing in your own community. I'll add this. We have been doing at the county and the city of Cleveland transformational work in terms of local hiring and contracting and apprenticeship work. There's an incredible amount of momentum. Dan Gilbert, we know the work that he's done as far as the casino itself, the syntax dollars. They are working now to do even more than they've done in past projects when it comes to hiring African Americans, Hispanics, females, and hiring and contracting, apprenticeship work. I just wanted to hear a little from you what your experience has been over the years and working in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County and those areas, and what opportunities you see with this particular project.
Yeah, I could add a few words because we've been working hand in hand with the city of Cleveland on a community benefits agreement. Bob has made a commitment to the mayor and his office to go above and beyond the statutory requirements in not only meeting some of the very important Chapter 187, 188 requirements in the City of Cleveland Code, but to actually bring in students in this organization to learn firsthand how the project inner workings are, work with the contractors to require them to have apprenticeship opportunities. There's going to be literally thousands of construction jobs on the site. So both enterprise and workforce requirements will be in those contracts, and certainly hope to exceed those. Bob, do you want to add a few words to that? Or?
Well, I just want to say that, we live in an era.
It's not green talk.
We live in an era where you can't do anything transformational unless it's a partnership, a public-private partnership. Now, in the past, when I was fortunate enough to be able to do what I consider civic-centric developments, and before the crash and before the reworking of the way things are financed and before retailers became impossible to deal with and all of the other reasons, and before costs went much higher than the ability for a market to pay for, I was able to make my contribution, so to speak, on my own. Now it's impossible. Well, if you're going to be my partner, okay, it's about us. It's about all of us. And if it's not about all of us, then why am I doing it? You know, to me, this is really the beauty of that name. This is really about us. This is really about that partnership. And the thing that I'm hoping for that will come from this the most is that we'll demonstrate as partners, as a community, what we can accomplish when we put all that together. And then we'll build a new city, because this is just the beginning. Then we'll challenge other cities in the world, okay? But we can't do that until we earn mutual respect and trust. So it starts here, right here, okay? I look forward to that, and I love to teach.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Sutton?
Thank you very much. It's very exciting, and I'm glad to hear what impact this will have. I remember when LeBron's first night, East 4th Street was so packed. There needs to be room to overflow on 4th, so that was evident. But the county's starting a sustainability department, and with an eye on efficiencies and sustainable practices. Is that something you would look to with regard to the project?
Yes.
I assume those look like green roofs on both those buildings, so.
They are. They are.
Yeah.
I was just curious, this photo, this is not
That's
the
the
night
photo from
LeBron-
that night.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
That's the parking lot right there.
I'm in that
It was
photo.
unbelievable. What a night.
Yeah.
What a night. It was unbelievable.
And you got retail committed?
Well, I'm working the process. I have their attention. It starts
Yeah,
there.
okay. Yeah, I just, until people get down there to the droves that they used to be, it's gonna be tough to get retail, but I
Well, there's no
agree.
question, but it's true in any project, and all the more, so, look, the good news is, I'm at the point in my career, I've been doing this since I was 21. I'm at the point in my career where I've developed enough of relationships with enough of the right people in the national retail world that they'll make the leap. They'll come along because of relationship and track record and prior success. We're also designing something that every one of them just their jaws drop. They get it, but they don't look at it and say, "You'll never do that," because I've done it with them before. So timing is everything, and the time is now. The convention is a great thing because it becomes a catalyst for me to say to those guys, you got to make a decision now. This is not one of those things where we're going to be in pre-development for 4 or 5 years. We're going now. And then they have to move us to the top of their list because they only do so many deals in a fiscal year. They have a capital expenditure budget. They're already, by the way, committing now to their 2016 and into 2017. So I'm fighting now, like the thing is standing up already, to get them to commit, on the basis of their belief that we will produce and it will be standing there ready for them to spend their capital expenditures, when it's time to open.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thanks. It's pretty exciting, very exciting stuff going on.
I would like to end with this. It's such a blessing to have a broad-based representative form of county government. This kind of partnership could not exist without that structure. It could not. And you're sitting in a great position of effectuating change, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Is there anyone who's signed in? Seeing how everybody has spoken, other than the media that's in the room, I think. No, there's one back there. Is there anyone that's signed in that wants to speak that's not on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Hearing none, Chair adjourns the meeting. Thank you. Good stuff, a lot of excitement.